I want to give you a disastrous glimpse into how insane the speculation in 2020, 2021, and 2022 got in Canada's real estate market. This story serves as a warning about real estate ownership for you and every single Canadian, with some major takeaways that could protect you from financial ruin. But it also involves a child star and its so-called influencer buying over $100 million of Canadian real estate, essentially using none of their own money, and how that empire that they had built of over 400 properties was built on a foundation of quicksand blowing up in their face just over the past few days, leaving over 300 people furious about how their money, millions of dollars, may have just gone up in smoke, additionally creating disasters for some smaller towns and communities in Canada. First, we need to get into the who. Who are these people that have built up this massive real estate portfolio that is crumbling as we speak? First, this is Dylan Suter, a realtor, investor, and social media personality. We'll talk a lot about that social media personality in this video. And second, we have Robbie Clark, who is a former child star turned investor and social media personality. He starred on a show that aired on YTV in Canada called The Zach Files for a couple of years. He's gone on to create a company called SID Developments, another thing that we're going to get deep into in this video. Now, each of these guys put a huge emphasis on their social media following, going on countless podcasts talking about their various successes in real estate and in finance, and you can see they amassed a large following. This is Dylan Suter, 261,000 followers, and Robbie Clark, 349,000 followers, a pretty big social profile. Now, as this story has been breaking, both of these people have made their accounts fully private, so we can't check out their posts, but we do have some examples of them talking about all their success on podcasts.
I guess, how many houses have you acquired and how many doors have you acquired?
That number changes daily. I think I signed off on 6 or 7 more houses today. 3 months ago, mid 2021, I surpassed 500 doors. A goal of mine was to get to 1,000 doors this year. I won't hit that this year, but I will definitely hit it next year. Upon completion, which most of these properties should be complete, somewhere between 130 and 150 million worth of real estate.
The problem is everybody can have an excuse, right? Like, I can have an excuse. Okay, cool. My credit was 420. Like, that's a joke of all, you know what I mean? when I was going through this, and I had to use other people to sign on a dotted line just to purchase more homes. And, ultimately, if you're going to work with lenders, and we work with a lot of private lenders on initial acquisitions, they got to know you know what you're doing. So who's your team? What's your experience? And what is your knowledge? You got to be able to talk about it and prove it.
A few of those clips are going to sound a little ironic once you find out what was going on behind closed doors, but all in all, this wasn't an uncommon thing to share your experiences on social media. From 2015 to 2019, there was a rise in popularity of social media figures who would focus their content on building wealth through real estate by growing an ever-expanding portfolio of rental properties and making content while they were doing that. It started off with just a few small YouTubers documenting their journey of putting in the work and renovating properties and renting them out to try to set them and their families up for success. And honestly, watching these guys was one of the reasons I first got interested in real estate and making YouTube videos. Though my content's changed a lot over the years, this is what lit the initial spark. And whether they realized it or not at the time, this vision of building up a real estate portfolio that can sustain you and your family is relatively easy to sell, right? There's no question that Canadians have been feeling the financial pinch for a number of years now, especially young Canadians, right, who graduate and realize that their degree won't get them any work, and even if it did, that work wouldn't get them ahead. So when you see somebody documenting how they've been able to make boatloads of money through real estate and are offering to tell you how they did it while you're struggling to make ends meet, well, a lot of people are going to listen, especially when we're in a decade and a half of extremely low interest rates, with the housing market booming and making new all-time highs essentially every single year. Now, while I think some of these early YouTubers had a lot of merit, there are certainly some benefits to sharing about how successful you are in real estate on the internet. We'll get into that and some of the less than truthful representations in just a second. So Dylan and Robbie, each with over 200,000 Instagram followers, set off on their goals of buying up as much real estate as possible alongside some of their other associates. And Robbie started a company called SID Developments. I'll let him explain it himself.
Over the past 10 years, we have purchased and renovated over 700 properties with an average after repair value of $350,000. This is significantly under the cost of new build and represents affordable housing on the sales side. We have sold 300 properties since inception, all with purchase prices under the cost of new build, creating economic value for the homeowners who purchase them or the tenants who live there. This is our construction management business that works with a network of local trades in each city. All work performed on the homes comes from local talent, totaling hundreds of workers and dozens of small businesses, giving them significant economic value to the city. We have a long-term approach and believe placing our clients first will provide long-term value for everyone. And in addition to this, over 70% of our units in any given city meet affordable housing criteria as stated by local and provincial guidelines.
Essentially what they're doing is going into less populated cities, at least 4 hours or more north of Toronto in Ontario, Canada, buying up distressed housing, renovating it, and then placing a tenant in the newly renovated property. The benefit in their eyes is that the lower purchase price of these properties makes it easier for the property to cash flow once a tenant is in it. All that means is that the monthly payment the tenant makes covers the landlord's mortgage payments, property taxes, and all other expenses related to the property. Now, if a property meets this criteria and there's even extra money at the end of each month, that would be considered cash flow positive. Now, we'll get into the dangerous world of owning the opposite, which is a cash flow negative property, in just a minute. It's going to play a major factor in the rest of this story. So Suter, Clark, and their associates set out to buy as many properties as possible. But you might be asking, hey Russell, how do they actually qualify for so many mortgages? Is that even possible? Well, you're right to raise an eyebrow at that. Most residential mortgage lenders will cap borrowers out at 5 properties, requiring borrowers to go with commercial mortgages for any further properties where far larger down payments are often required, which often slows down investors as they have trouble coming up with that extra money. The workaround for real estate investors like these two is likely a mixture of 2 popular strategies in the real estate and investor world, something called BRRRR investing and something called OPM. It sounds complex, but I promise you it's not, and once you understand this, everything else is going to make a hell of a lot more sense. BRRRR is an acronym for the steps that you take in this investing process, and this process ends up with you potentially getting all of the money that you put into the house back in your pocket at the end of the day. Let me explain. It stands for buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and the most important part, repeat. Investors will buy a distressed property, one that needs a lot of work on it, right? Or one that maybe is off market and they can get for a deal. Maybe a hoarder lives there. They can in some way get this property for ideally under market value. Now, the next step is to renovate the property, bring it up to standards, ideally, and then allow for a tenant to move in, which is the next step, which is renting this out. Now, the benefit of renovating the property and renting it out is that that will impact the perceived value of that property. And when you get an appraisal for that property, they'll see, hey, you're getting this much in rent for it. Maybe you've bought a bungalow and you've added a basement apartment. You're making so much in rent. The property is largely improved. As a result, your appraisal will come back at a far higher number than the purchase price that you initially bought the property for. At that point, you can use the appraisal to refinance the property with a different lender, and sometimes they'll even allow for you to do a cash out refinance, which will allow you to borrow based on the current value of the property, the improved property, and take out the equity that you had in this property, potentially 80% of the after repair value of the property's sort of value after it's been fixed up. Now, because you get all this money back in your pocket, you're able to go out, buy another house, and do the whole thing over again. These are just make-believe numbers to make the math easier, but let's say you found a property that was not in great condition for $175,000. You're able to buy that property and do $25,000 of strategic renovations designed to increase the value of the property. This is probably largely cosmetics, things that will increase the value more relative to the amount you spend doing them. Then you get an appraisal at the end of the day. Maybe it comes in at $250,000, a significant amount more than both the purchase price and the construction costs that you've put into it. If you then refinance the property based on this new appraisal and you get a cash out refinance, well, then you can maybe borrow 80% of the value of the property, the new value, and you get to pull that $200,000 out, and that equals the amount of money that you put into the property in the first place. So essentially, you get to own this property without having any of your own money in it. Then with that $200,000, you lather, rinse, and repeat this method. This is how so many real estate investors can really start to scale up their businesses, being able to recycle the same money over and over again. But you might be wondering, like, how do they come up with that initial purchase price? Do they just have 175 grand sitting around? Well, that is where the other element of this comes into play, which is OPM, something that stands for other people's money. When banks and credit unions stop lending to you, the only other place you can turn is a place called private lending. This is where individual people will give you a sum of money with set terms, where you'll have to pay them a higher interest rate than what's typical. Maybe you'll even have to pay them points, is what they call it, which is a percentage of the total amount that they lend you. Either way, this is an expensive way to borrow some money, but it is a way that you can borrow additional money. Now, some people, when the banks will no longer give them money to buy homes, will lean on OPM, other people's money, get private mortgages from private lenders, and then use that to go and then purchase the property to be able to repeat that over and over again with the BRRRR strategy. When these are used in tandem, that's where the big unlock is for these real estate investors. Now, the extremely high interest rates and the exorbitant fees that these private lenders charge is supposed to compensate them for the additional risk that they're taking on by lending the money out. But they could never have imagined just how much risk they were taking on when they lent to this organization of investors. By using other people's money in the BRRRR strategy, and additionally using a complex web of co-owners and associates, shell corporations operating under a slew of different business names, they expanded their empire into the lower income and lower cost of housing areas of Timmins, Sudbury, and Sault Ste. Marie, cities in Ontario throughout 2021 and 2022. Then, in an instant, as if overnight, everything changed.
Inflation is too high, and more people are getting more worried that high inflation is here to stay. We cannot let that happen. The Canadian economy is overheated. Our goal is to get inflation back to its 2% target with a soft landing for the economy. To accomplish that, we are increasing our policy rate quickly to prevent high inflation from becoming entrenched.
In late 2021 and early 2022, inflation went absolutely insane in Canada, so much so that the Bank of Canada had to respond by drastically increasing interest rates and doing so at an historically quick pace, something we covered here on the channel very heavily, going up essentially 4.75 percentage points for the interest rate in just about a year. The Bank of Canada increased interest rates to fight against inflation, arguably fighting the very thing that they created by creating hundreds of billions of new dollars and adding them to the Canadian financial system via something called quantitative easing, but that's a whole different story for a whole different day. All of the impacts of these higher rates were meant to reduce spending or demand in the economy so that prices would stop rising as quickly and inflation would come down. It meant that businesses would borrow less and expand less, hire less. It makes it more expensive to borrow for everyone, any kind of consumer loan. Mortgages became more expensive, meaning people can afford less house, and as a result, that drove real estate prices down. Now, all of this can be especially damaging for real estate companies like the one we're talking about, especially with business models that only work when interest rates are low and the values of properties just keep on increasing. But Robbie and Dylan and the people they work with must have had a plan for this, right? Interest rates can't stay low forever, and super successful people with such a seemingly illustrious track record, people who even teach this kind of real estate investing stuff to their hundreds of thousands of followers, well, these people must have had a backup plan, an alternative exit strategy, right? Wrong. Remember the BRRRR strategy we talked about earlier? One of the key elements of it is increasing the ARV, or the after repair value, so that you can refinance and get all of your money back so you can do it again. Now, this is a lot easier when prices are rising for these houses, because even if you don't renovate efficiently, and even if you can't get the rent that you expected, the property's value will still go up because of a booming market, and you'll still be able to get all your money back. But all of a sudden, when that market is softening, well, things got a whole lot harder. Distressed properties that you thought were a good deal all of a sudden became a cash sink. And you owe private lenders, remember all of that OPM, all that other people's money, you're paying them high interest rates, and all of a sudden, you no longer have a way to pay them back. Now that is exactly how this can happen. Take a look at this. 3 landlords among largest real estate holders in Ontario owe $144 million under bankruptcy protection. As news spread, it seems that some of the people who lent them this money, the other people in the other people's money equation, say that 32 lawsuits are currently filed against the corporations in courthouses across Ontario. But because they filed for bankruptcy protection, it means that no legal action can be taken by these lenders to recoup their money until after this bankruptcy protection is over. But it seems that in the lead up to this, as all this was happening, they were still holding out hope that the market would take a turn, interest rates would come down, and property values would boom again, saving them from the huge hole that they had dug themselves into. Potentially to try to raise extra money to stop the collapse from happening, Dylan hosted an event this past August that was billed to help business owners grow their business by up to 150%.
Dylan Suter here. I'm often asked, what have you done over the last number of years to see the growth you have in every area of your life? August 1st, you have an opportunity to come and meet his top coach and trainer, as well as his brother-in-law, and learn the techniques that he teaches at his events for a low ticket price of $129 to start. Come buy your ticket now, get here, they're gonna sell quick. You a small business owner looking to get in front of up to 700 small business owners? You want to get the best ROI? For this $2,500 booth, you get exclusivity and access in this beautiful atrium in the Burlington Performing Arts Center August 1st. We only have 20 sponsorship opportunities available, and we're over 50% sold out. Sign up today before they're gone.
And it seems like around the same time, Robbie was holding out hope that interest rates would come down. Here's a YouTube short that he posted trying to sort of explain how he thought interest rates were bound to come down.
Let's talk about the exciting world of interest rates and why I believe they are bound to come down over the next year or two across North America. You can only keep interest rates so long because if you keep them this high, we're just gonna have to print more money to service that debt because we have way too much debt in order to keep interest rates high.
But as we all know now, rates have remained high to this day at the beginning of 2024. Now, relief may come in the form of rate cuts over the next year. In fact, many economists believe that it's going to happen by April of this year, but it seems too late for this group of investors now, and too late for all of the lenders to get their money back as they originally expected. Now, you might be saying, oh, Russell, boo-hoo, these wealthy private lenders who are able to lend hundreds of thousands of dollars out, they knew what they were doing, they took the risks, this is their fault. And you would be right, but only to a certain extent. One of the things that lenders often look for before lending out their money is a track record of successful projects and cosigns from other trusted industry professionals to lower the risk that their money won't be returned. Now this is where the story gets even crazier, and it involves fake profiles, facades of success, famous rappers and porn stars, and best case negligent, worst case crooked mortgage broker. Now, if I'm someone who's considering lending money to these people, I'm going to want to know that they've done this before, that they're well respected in the industry, and it seems like these investors that were involved knew how important their public personas would be to help them secure funding. Now, while researching this video, I found a clip from, again, a podcast that made my eyebrows raise and made me do just a little bit more digging.
And I think that's the big part is like, you can't afford it, you still do it. And so Stefan pushed me. He actually had 3 big goals for me. He said, write a book, buy a 100+ unit apartment building, and spend over $250,000 on a brand. And I don't like marketing. I mean, we're KW, we're prospecting based, marketing enhanced. We're not marketing based. You're just throwing stuff to the wall, seeing what sticks, and with a marketing approach. And so I was not loving the whole brand concept. And it took me a few years, but eventually I did invest in a brand. And that's where I got verified on Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff by investing in that.
This clip made me think, wow, how do you invest in a brand? Would it be paying Facebook to run ads promoting your content, investing in creating higher production value, higher value informational content to grow your following? How does one exactly invest in a brand? Well, it seems that this investment was a little more direct and a little more deceitful than you might have thought. By going to a website called Social Blade, you can see more detailed stats about a person's following on a number of different social media platforms. Here you can see Dylan's page with 261,000 followers, but when you scroll down just a little bit more, well, there's a revealing chart. You can see for the past couple of years, the profile has only lost followers, but you can see 1 week in particular where the follower count spiked dramatically, 185,400 followers in a single week were added to this profile. And if we flip over to Robbie Clark's profile on the same website and we scroll down, well, we see a very similar thing where there's these small 1-week spikes where tens of thousands of followers are added in a single week. And then the larger spikes, this one was 81,000 followers in a single week. This one was, 164,000 followers in a single week. Now, of course, this is only speculation based on this evidence, but it seems to me that it's very likely that this direct investment in building a brand was actually paying for a bunch of botted followers to make your follower count go up dramatically. Now, I believe based on this that they did it to help them source more distressed properties from wholesalers and to source more potential rubes to lend them money. And the kind of deceitful social profiles don't end there. On Robbie's YouTube page, it seems he tried to leverage his connections with celebrities to craft a narrative about himself.
What's happening, Robbie Clark? Yo, I got one question. I got some cash. What would you do with $1 million cash or $1 million? How would you invest it? Let me know.
Hey Robbie, I've been hearing a lot about BitClout lately, and my friends have been telling me that it's a scam. I know that you invest a lot on BitClout, and I was wondering what you think of it.
Yo, Robbie, I heard that you buying more homes than anybody in Canada, and I had a question. If I wanted to get into real estate investing, where should I start?
Yo, Robbie, I heard you buying the most houses in Canada. What's some tips you got for the new upcomers who trying to invest?
Yo, Robbie, I know you buy all the real estate in Canada. What type of real estate should I buy right now? I'm in Beverly Hills.
Yo, what up, Robbie? I got a question. I know you buying up all the homes in Canada right now, but outside of real estate, what's some other areas you're looking to invest in?
Tiger, what's good, bro? Listen, I'm glad you asked this.
Yo, Robbie, what's going on? Thank you for sponsoring this giveaway. Thank you so much. And I heard you buy the most homes in Canada. Tell me how the fuck you do that shit, you heard?
Danny, what's going on, man? Listen, I really hope this video helps out a lot of people because people are going to hear that title and just assume that I had millions of dollars to buy any property that I wanted, and that's just not the case.
Now, anyone who's remotely familiar with the internet can probably tell that Robbie is likely not connected to these big stars and that he probably just found them on Cameo or some other site that allows you to pay money for celebs to shout you out and say essentially whatever you want them to on video. Another thing Robbie would point to showing his success is his inclusion in USA Today with a glowing headline, Robbie Clark shares his recipe for financial success. And in this article includes a glowing description of him and all of his successes, and at the very end, gloating about how he's buying more properties than anybody in Canada. Just a quick cursory search on Google and you can find a number of different articles that are kind of all trying to push the sort of same narrative. Look how successful this guy is. If you Google his name, this is what's going to come up. But if you look more closely, you can see this story is paid for by an advertiser. Members of the editorial and news staff of the USA Today network were not involved in the creation of this content. Who has the byline? It's Robbie Clark himself, who likely wrote this article as well as potentially some of those other ones that I showed you. So all of this to say, if you didn't look extremely closely and you just looked at the analytics of their social profiles, you could see how someone potentially less internet savvy could be convinced of their success. But still, you'd probably say something like, well, lender beware, they knew lending was risky, and again, that's fair enough. But let's go just one layer deeper. Even if you would have seen through this phony social profile, well, you might not have seen through this. Dave Butler, a Canadian mortgage professional, was able to find some of the packages that were sent to potential private lenders. Now, these packages, at least, were approved by a mortgage broker named Claire Drage. This is the document that the mortgage broker would give to her Rolodex of private lending lenders, trying to sell them on the opportunity to lend their money to these investors. Now, inside these packages, there's some rather interesting claims. They start off strong saying, we thoroughly endorse and approve these borrowers. They've proven themselves to be experienced, professional, and ultimately successful. You might say, what are these names? Well, there's, like I said, a complex web of different co-owners and different shell corporations that all own these properties. These two are involved in SID Developments, which is Robbie's company. This package offers the potential lender some pretty juicy fees and pretty juicy interest rates, $2,025 per month in an interest only payment at 9% with an $8,000 lender fee to try to incentivize this lender to lend 100% of the purchase price of the home value. That means that the investors don't have any skin in the game, but these lenders potentially could be fronting the entire purchase price of the property. This report also used some pretty generous valuations. They said, okay, even though we bought this at $270,000, when we finish renovating it, it's going to be worth $400,000. So you're definitely going to get your money back, even though the average price of a home in this market is actually $250,000. So saying you can get $400,000 after renovations might be pushing it a little bit. It also includes very generously phrased borrower profiles, giving the lender a better idea of who they're loaning to, talking about all of their successes while also connecting them to Robbie Clark. This is someone who's started another business with him. And if you scroll down here, the woman here who's also married to one of the buyers of this property is a full-time realtor that works with Dylan Suter as her team lead. Sending out a package like this, I believe, is hugely irresponsible for a mortgage broker to do. Claire Drage essentially led her private lending clients like lambs to the slaughter, whether she knew so or not, recommending that her clients lend to these borrowers, potentially at 100% loan to value, knowing that they were expanding extremely quickly and likely leveraged way over their heads with other similar loans for properties and projects that won't work out if the market doesn't keep pumping at a historic rate due to ultra low interest rates. And as shit was starting to hit the fan, Claire's clients started reaching out to her saying, hey, I'd like my money back from this private investment, to which allegedly her office responded that Claire wouldn't even be able to take the call because she's too busy, and they can't give the money back because they're moving things around. They have a couple big projects on the go, and even asking, hey, why do you even want your money back? Claire Drage even advertised how helpful it would be to work with her to lend out your money because it makes it easier to get your money back. They say that at the end of the term, the borrower will either execute their exit strategy and pay you back, or you may approve a renewal. But by working with a mortgage broker like me, we're able to help facilitate the exit strategy smoothly, i.e. you're gonna get your money back because we're such good professionals. The Globe and Mail article that reported on this story said that to finance all of these purchases for these investors, the companies obtained more than 390 mortgages worth $89 million, 120 second mortgages, additional mortgages leveraged against the properties worth $8 million, and 802 individual unsecured promissory notes worth $54 million, essentially loans with nothing as collateral. On top of all of this money that they owe to private lenders, they additionally owe $2.8 million in unpaid municipal taxes, utility bills, and corporate income taxes. Again, these property taxes, municipal taxes, going to the cities that they're in. These are communities that often are in desperate need of this funding, often going to the education system in these more rural towns. Additionally, $600,000 to contractors and service providers, some of the people that Robbie was bragging about giving economic support to in that original video, as well as $55,000 in payroll deductions to the federal government, all money that this conglomerate of investors owes. Now, we don't know if Drage was the only broker doing this for the team of investors. It could have been a more widespread situation, and I think that that's actually probably pretty likely that multiple brokers would be sending similar packages out to their entire Rolodex of private lenders. But we can't be sure with the information that's publicly available. And as a disclaimer, all throughout this video, I'm just doing my best to piece together as close to an accurate picture of the situation as I can with what's publicly available. But I'm looking forward to hearing some public statements from these guys if there's anything that they need to set the record straight on. But there is one thing for certain. It's clear that whether it be via these packages or the artificial social media profiles with bot followers, it's clear that these private lenders were misled. The Globe and Mail was able to get in touch with one of these private lenders, one who lended $184,000 at 8% in 2022 to who she thought was a sole operator purchasing a single-family home in Sault Ste. Marie. She said, at no time were we told that they are part of this conglomerate of all these companies. We would never have lent to them if we knew that was the case. With 32 lawsuits already filed from some of the 300 lenders that lent for these people, the companies and these investors decided to apply for court-ordered protection, essentially file for bankruptcy or protection, bankruptcy protection. Now, this allowed them to sort of pause all the proceedings on these legal cases, all of these lawsuits, to give the investors the opportunity to try to figure out some way out of this situation. They went to the judge and said, hey, we only have $100,000 in cash on hand, even though we owe $124 million, likely at high interest rates. They're facing a severe liquidity crisis, and they're saying, okay, well, if we had all of these people coming for us and trying to enforce all these repossessions, well, that would be incredibly destructive for all of the creditors that we owe. We need to do this in an orderly way so that as many people can get their money back as possible, or at least that's the argument that they're trying to make to the judge, which the judge then granted the protection for a few months from all of these pending lawsuits. But while I do think that these private lenders are victims to some extent in this collapse of epic proportions, I think that the real victims are the communities where this large-scale residential investing was happening and the tenants who lived in these properties. The mayor of Sault Ste. Marie, one of the towns that they heavily invested in, over 50 properties, said, well, this has been a disaster for the community. This is coming from the mayor. He continued saying, I think that we'd be better off if their assets were ordered to be liquidated by the courts and bought up by reputable landlords who had some connection to the community, because clearly these corporate entities, these shell corporations, have no regard for the well-being of the community. Another article covering this back in August outlined the experience of one of the tenants. They said, well, everything looked great. I saw the photos of the house I wanted to rent. Everything looked good. But when I got here, there's a huge crack in my ceiling. Multiple appliances weren't working. Some big issues, saying that the property was unacceptable upon arrival. Additionally, one of the connected companies was hit with $140,000 in fire code fines, not following the fire codes in the area, potentially putting tenants at risk. It's an awful situation for everybody involved, but I wonder, what can we take away from this saga? How can we learn from it and use the information to better protect ourselves and our families in Canada? Now, after hearing all of that, I'm guessing you don't need me to tell you about the dangers of borrowing too much money and using leverage to purchase your investments. Now, borrowing vast sums of money is one way, and one of the only ways, to extremely rapidly expand an investment portfolio. But each additional dollar of leverage that you take on amplifies your risk tremendously. This goes for all kinds of investments, real estate, stocks, you name it. Leverage is a tool that should be used sparingly and thoughtfully. But most people aren't trying to build giant real estate empires. This also applies, though, to anybody who owns a home or one day wants to own a home. One of the biggest problems that Robbie and Dylan seem to have run into is the fact that they didn't have a backup plan or an exit strategy other than the prices have to go up. All of a sudden, they didn't have the cash flow to cover the payments on the money that they borrowed, and that led them into the tricky situation that we've been talking about. So if you're buying your own home, I think that this maps directly to the situation where you could potentially lose your job, making it too difficult to make mortgage payments. That's why I often recommend that people seek to buy homes where there's secondary rental potential, even while you're living in it. If you lose your job, what will you do? What's your backup plan? Can you get additional roommates to help cover the mortgage in the interim? Do you have a 6 months emergency fund saved up that will help to cover your payments while you look for a new job? I think that thoroughly thinking about these things and these kinds of backup plans can help prepare you for a worst case scenario. Additionally, you should tread lightly if you ever consider lending privately. Don't innately trust the people that you work with. Verify things for yourself. It's so easy to be misled by fraudulent social profiles and brokers whose own financial self-interest could outweigh their dedication to the safety of your money as a client. Now, I think it's far better in my eyes than doing this sort of risky private lending to just dollar cost average to invest your money into low-fee index ETFs that give you broad exposure to the markets over time. The temptation of fast money, though, through private lending and the fees and the high rates that you can get and paid in connection with this lending, well, it often doesn't outweigh the additional risk you're taking on to get that boosted return. And finally, don't let hubris and greed get ahead of you. I know nothing about who these people are as individuals, but my guess is that they didn't get into this business to hurt people and to hurt communities. My guess is, like many other Canadians, they started out trying to find a business that could help them get ahead, potentially to give them a better life for their families and potential children in a challenging time, especially for younger people. A time where even great jobs that pay well make you feel like you're barely scraping by. None of that excuses what was done here. What it seems to me like is a greedy desire to scale bigger, build higher, and own more and more. Now, don't get me wrong, I think everyone should strive to achieve their goals and their dreams, but along the way, take a good hard look at yourself in the mirror and ask, am I stepping on the people around me, pushing them down to bring myself up? And I think achieving your goals without hurting the people around you is, in my eyes, the true measure of success, even if it means that you have to achieve those goals more slowly. Hey, who knows, maybe there's more examples of situations just like this, more empires on the edge of collapse that we just don't know about yet. If one group could do it, who knows if others did it as well around the same time. I'll definitely be watching. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out the link in the description for my email list where I send out additional sources and bonus content whenever I post these videos. But with all of that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.